What are the greatest ethical challenges you think society faces today? And what about that? Is there a particular aspect of that question that concerns you most?
What concerns me most is the fact that what we're doing now is really not so far removed from turning our eyes to those, ships that drifted around the Mediterranean with European Jews on it, looking for a safe harbour in the late 1930s. And that to me is just terrifying to think that, my God, how far have we not moved from those days? And I think that the idea that we're talking about, war refugees and economic refugees and climate change refugees, we, from a design perspective, have a massive responsibility, because if you talk to some of those countries that have welcomed migrants, like Germany, like Sweden, I think there's a strong, everybody can admire the ethical and moral impulse to accept those refugees, but they need to quickly get the designers on board to make sure that those people are housed, schooled, that there's an infrastructure in place. Because certainly if you speak to the most liberal-minded Germans and Swedes, they say, suddenly our village,
absolutely,
nobody
there
had
is a
thought
practical
about
aspect to the decision.
And that's where design comes in. And I think that, designers, one of the big challenges that we face is going to be not only mass migration and mass urbanization, it's the kind of conflation of the two. It's how are we suddenly going to create these big cities fast enough to deal with these migrant populations that are coming from rural areas. We're now talking about Chinese aging populations are now moving to the cities. It's not just the young folk looking for work, it's now the older populations are migrating to the city. How are their needs going to be accommodated? So
different types of migration, even internal,
Absolutely.
For example. China's the perfect example of that.
We've just done a project, our Helen Hamlin Centre for Design, which looks specifically at aging populations, has just done a project with Tsinghua University in Beijing, looking precisely at this issue of how do you meet the housing needs and social needs of people who are older and have lived.
And Tsinghua is a wonderful example of a very technologically focused institution. So joining the design and the arts with the technology.
Absolutely.
In terms of the design aspect, didn't you have a student, did I read properly that you had a student who did something for Syrian refugees that was wearable shelter?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
What's so great about it is when you look at that project and you see a photograph in the press, and it's been quite well publicised, you look at it and think, oh, that's a piece of work by a fashion student. It's actually an interior design student, and what she did, the group of three students, what they did was actually create, out of Tyvek, which is a very strong, cheap building material, they created a coat that you could wear while you are on the move, and very, very light. And then when you kind of reach that awful wall that says no, you can't,
another inch,
then suddenly you take the coat off and you pull it this way and that way, and suddenly creates a little shelter. It's such a clever idea.